We started last week a series called A New Dawn, which I still feel is a little bit cheesy, but we do the daylight moniker thing around here, and so we're sticking with the light theme, and we've been asking the question of how do we relaunch post-COVID? For many, Rusty brought up a really interesting point at our meeting Monday night. When you change locations as a church, you automatically lose about 20% of your population. That's just kind of a universal statistic, and it doesn't matter where you move to. You can move across the street, and you lose about 20%. That's just the facts. But you hope from whatever community that you move to, you're going to draw another 10 to 15% immediately, so it's kind of a wash, ultimately. Well, we didn't get to experience that wash because of COVID. We were set to launch Easter of 2020 and had all the flyers in the mail, and that nixed us completely, and so we're just now getting back in the place where we want to reach out to the community, make ourselves known, do some marketing and that sort of thing. And so last week we talked quite a bit about like who our target market is. Like if we add 100 people over the next couple of years, where do we want those 100 people to come from? And it brought up a lot of questions, but one of those questions can be kind of addressed with this new shirt that I got today. What does this mean on our way, Ryan? He's stuffing his face here, and I'm... Oh, very cool. So what does this shirt represent? Come here for a second. Come here. Put down your food, bro. We're a church for not-so-churchy people. Hello. I mean, we even allow the heresy of Bill's T-shirts in here.
I'm sorry.
So what does this talk to my chest?
You still mad about that Broncos game?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Shut
I
it.
think the Bills just scored again, by the way.
Shut it.
So I coach cross country at Dunn, and every year we do it. Okay. You can hear me? I'm pretty loud. I'm a coach.
Yeah, but
man.
we're online. Go.
Oh, okay. So I coach cross country at Dunn, and every season we do what I call a freebie tee to make sure that every kid has some kind of shirt. And I get sponsors, and I asked H if we wanted to put, like if Daylight wanted to sponsor. He's like, sure. So this year's shirt is on our way, and there's the Daylight logo. And on the back, so it's on the back it says we're on our way to breaking through to something new, to chase our dreams, because we were made for greater things. And it's just it's a reminder to the kiddos that they can do anything they put their mind to. So just positive message, positive vibes for the kids.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty psyched about the shirt, but it brings up the question of that kind of motto that we use around here as a church for not-so-churchy people, and how that impacts different people and how they view the church. And I've always felt a little bit uncomfortable with it because it kind of, we try to be a church without borders or without barriers, and it kind of does paint a little bit of a picture if you read it differently than I mean it to be read. And so I want to talk about that today. So when I sent him the logo for this shirt, this was his comment. He says, I love that logo so much. I know it sounds dumb, but I got teary-eyed thinking about it on the back of the shirt. And that's because, dude's sitting here having breakfast in his shorts and his Bills T-shirt. This is a not-so-churchy dude, right? But he also texted me recently about how much he's been studying the Bible and loving Jesus and open about talking about Jesus and so forth. And he is, in a sense, Ryan, sorry to put you, you're the front row guy. He is, so just a couple years ago, you were sitting in your van listening to one of our podcasts when you kind of prayed to turn your life over to Jesus, and it was pretty transformational. And so that's one response to it, and it's kind of what we're going for. But then I was talking to a friend today that talked about his wife, and his wife says, my wife loves church. So this phrase or expression kind of rubs a little differently for a churchy person or a person who grew up in church. And so it begs the question of what exactly are we trying to accomplish here? And I want to fly through some of it and get to the really good stuff today, which has nothing to do with me. But this was a list that I put on the screen last week of those 100 people that we want to grow, where we'd like them to come from. And I realized when writing this list that it doesn't include people who have a church background. And so I threw in missional at the last minute, which I now realize was not adequate to express what I was trying to convey. And so let's just start with the phrase, and a church for not-so-churchy people. And we're going to go through line by line and I'm going to give you my perspective on why we continue to use this. And I'm open to ditching it. I'm open to finding a better way to communicate it, but I think it communicates to people that we want it to communicate to. So let's start with a church. Now, I have a large, this is a medium because I'm a medium nowadays because I've lost a lot of weight, so thank you very much. Oh, wait. This is the large. And I'm going to give a large Done cross-country shirt to the first person that can yell out to me the Greek word for church. Thank you. Can you pass that back? Very good, very good. One person has learned one thing from me over 7 years. I'm pretty pumped about this. So ecclesia is so when we say we're a church for not-so-churchy people, that's where it starts, is we are a church. And I don't ever want that point to be missed. We're not a church because we minister to not-so-churchy people. We start with the ecclesia. Anybody know the name Bill Mounts? Does that sound familiar to anybody? I thought Sydney might recognize it at this point. But Bill Mounts is kind of, so I'm not a Greek scholar, but I'm kind of fascinated with the ancient Greek language and how it got translated into English and so forth. But Bill Mounts is the guy that every Greek scholar studied. Like, he's the guy that trains the scholars. And today in America, if you study New Testament Greek, you're studying Bill Mounts' work. He's the consummate Greek dude. And he says this, he says, ecclesia is defined as the church as a community of believers who meet together regularly and irregularly to love one another, care for one another, carry one another's burdens, stir up one another to love and good works. And so when we use the word ecclesia, when we say we're a church for not-so-churchy people, we start off with we are a gathering. We're a gathering of people wanting to encourage each other, build one another up, love one another, and so forth, and follow Jesus together. We never want to gloss over the fact that Jesus is the center of our community and the whole reason that we gather. And so the historic ecclesia from the New Testament times forward, our pillars are kind of built around what we thought that they kind of did. And so who can tell us our pillars real quick? Everyone cheated. I feel like if it wasn't on the screen, many of you would have nailed this one. Surely at this point, you guys would have nailed this one down, right? And so I want to rock through real quick just these four pillars and how they tie into the traditional ecclesia. So a lot of times when we talk about not so churchy, we're kind of bucking against tradition. We're saying it's like a dentist. If a dentist hung a sign on his wall that said "a dentist for people who hate dentists," well, obviously he's not giving up root canals, right? He's not giving up pulling teeth. He's reimagining, rethinking how he approaches things, right? That's what he's trying to communicate, and that's what we're trying to communicate, is that we're trying to look at the baby in the bathwater, which we talked about a lot last week, is what do we hold on to and what do we let go down the drain? And there's some important things that I think we need to let slide and some important things that we hold on to. And service, study, worship, rest construe a lot of what we hold on to around here. Jesus in Matthew 25 tells the very, very scary parable of the sheep and the goats, where he separates at the end times and judgment day people into two tribes, and there's the sheep on one side and the goats on one side. And he says to the sheep, he says, the reason you're in this group, the reason you're advancing into eternity, or however you want to describe it, he says, I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Our plaque on the wall back there says service is our pillar because love always serves. And we've done plenty of messages on this topic. And we believe that love takes action. Love does stuff, and it results in service. If you read in Acts chapter 6, the disciples Peter had gotten up and preached, and thousands of people had come to follow Jesus, and now they were starting kind of an organization, kind of this organic organization, and one of the things they were doing was feeding a lot of hungry people. And at some point, there was some turmoil because the Hellenistic Jews and the Hebraic Jews were kind of arguing, saying that the Hebraic Jews are getting their widows covered, but the Hellenistic Jews are not getting their widows covered. So there's this turmoil. And they step up and they say, okay, we got to make a change here. The disciples are preaching and praying, and then they're also trying to oversee this food distribution. And I've noticed it as a pastor. Being a pastor is kind of like the plate thing at the circus, the guy who's spinning a plate and spinning a plate and spinning a plate. And once you start spinning this plate on this end, this plate's starting to wobble a little bit, and then you try to go to fix that, and that's what these guys are experiencing. But service is a priority, and so from the early time of the church, service is a priority. The prophet Isaiah says this. He says, "Is this not the kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke?" For some reason, I put that on there twice. But historically, from the very beginning, and even pre-New Testament, service and giving up your life, the cross is an act of service. God so loved the world that he gave. And so we believe in Daylight Church that part of our ecclesia, part of our community is about giving and serving. We give away 15% of our, so part of the reason we were able to sponsor this cross-country organization is because we give away 15 to 20% of our money off the top every single month that comes by. We do service projects. We talk about service. We're putting together a service team. So service is the focus of the series, or the sermon next week, and we're going to really talk about ramping that up. But so when we say we're a church, one of the things we focus on is we're a gathering of people who want to serve the community. We want to serve people who are hurting, people who are ostracized. So we want to serve the not-so-churchy church that's out there. So it's an act of service. And then we talk about study. And I don't know why it still says Isaiah 58, because this absolutely is not in Isaiah 58. So I had this thing that happened Friday with our new software where, you know how you hit Control-Z and it's supposed to back up one step? Whatever you did, you correct by hitting Control-Z. After hours on this presentation, I hit Control-Z and it wiped the entire presentation. And so I started from scratch. So if you see junk on the screen, it just about killed me. Oh, it was so bad. But anyway, this passage that is incorrectly labeled here says, how many times shall I forgive my brother or sisters who sin against me? So the apostles come to Jesus and they ask him this question. And so many of Jesus' sermons start with questions. And who can tell me what we say about study around here?
No question is off the table.
And that's not even on the screen, so you guys are nailing it. No question is off the table. We believe that around here. And many of the sermons. The sermon in Acts chapter 2 started with a question. The Sermon on the Mount has questions caked into it. Jesus asks questions and then answers them. You see questions all the time. And we're not afraid of questions around here. We believe study is an important part. We believe studying the scriptures is important. We believe sermons are important. I mean, don't we really believe that sermons are pretty important around here? I mean, come on, let's talk about it, right? This one in Acts is really funny and really not funny at the same time. As Paul spoke on and on, so he's sermonizing, a young man named Eutychus, sitting on the windowsill, became very drowsy. You guys can relate. Finally, he fell sound asleep and dropped 3 stories to his death below. The good news is Paul was like this mega apostle, and he drops down and throws himself over the body, and the body raises up. And you know what Paul does? He keeps preaching. Sermons have always been important. We believe in loving God with our mind and remembering the scriptures. This is from Deuteronomy chapter 6 when the law was introduced. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. And these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and your gates. And so from the very beginning of God kind of revealing himself to people, there was the written scriptures. There was the written that contained the word of God. And it's tantamount to the Christian faith. And we don't gloss over that here, that we think the scriptures are very important. We think that studying and asking the right questions are really important. And so when we talk about we're a church, one of the historic things that we embrace that we're not washing down the drain is this concept of studying the scriptures, asking the right questions, and being unafraid to ask the questions. And then, of course, what's our third pillar? Service, study, worship. Very good. Not on the screen. You win. Now, this was super easy to find a passage. I mean, I could. It's not hard to find a passage on worship in the Bible. From beginning to end, worship, 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 worship. It talks about at the end times, once everything is made new, that people, it says there's creatures around the throne of God that all they do 24/7, 365 days a year, if there's even such a thing as a year, is proclaim how great God is. Worship comes real easy when you're trying to find scripture, but it says, come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. In approximately just the end of the 1st century BC, so the Jesus movement had been operational for about 70, 80 years at this point. There was a guy named Pliny the Younger that was writing to the Roman Emperor Trajan, and he had all these Christians in his province that he was trying to figure out what to do with because they were causing quite a stir because they wanted them to worship the Roman gods, and the Christians were not worshiping the Roman gods. And so he writes this letter to the Emperor Trajan and says, I got these problem people, what should I do about it? And part of what he says in in that letter, he says, the Christians meet on a certain day before light, where they gather and sing hymns to Christ as to a God. So even from a non-biblical source, we know that from early times, the church would gather on a particular day, and there have been debates about when that day was. I lean pretty heavily towards it being on Sundays, commemorating Resurrection Day. And his name's Pliny the Younger, but I call him PT, and he's cool with that. And so, but from the very first gathering to worship, we've worshiped this morning. Wasn't it amazing? Wasn't it a good time? Paul, you and your team are stellar, and we love you. It's okay to appreciate him out loud. But we celebrate the sacraments, baptism and communion. We celebrate with singing. We celebrate together. We share together. And service, study, and rest, the other pillars, are kind of secretly built on the foundation of worship. Service, study, and rest are acts of worship. And so when we talk about being a church for not-so-churchy people, it will never be said about us that we don't worship. It will never be said about us that we don't dedicate our lives or commit our lives. It's like the dentist who says for people who don't much like dentists, it doesn't mean he's not dedicated to healthy teeth. It means he's dedicated to exploring a new way to draw people in, to work on teeth, to make it as pain-free and accessible as possible. And that's what we're talking about here. And rest, from the beginning of time, in Genesis, it says God rested on the seventh day. And then in Mark chapter 2, Jesus says this word about the Sabbath. The Sabbath rule of taking a day off and doing nothing was never meant to be a law that God's testing you to see if you are among the faithful. He says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. This was not a rule about you obeying. It was a rule about you needing to rest and you needing to offer yourselves up. And so we take rest very seriously around here. So part of our ecclesia is around rest. It's about enjoying one another. What does the back of our T-shirt say? Jesus ate everyone. That's exactly right. Jesus ate with everyone. And we talk a lot about it being a church built around food. And we've got tables in the back because we want to start taking this a little bit more seriously. But as an ecclesia, as a gathering of the followers of Jesus, service, study, worship, and rest are pretty historically backed up. And then we also talk about God's pace being peace. And this passage from 2 Corinthians says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul, I appreciated what he had to say during the music set, was we're so much about striving as Western civilization. We're so much about individuality and owning. And then we think that we have to measure up to God and add up to God and do what God expects of us. And that's part of our rest component too, is that we really do believe that God's the one that does the vast majority of the work. That our part in this thing is pretty small. Our part is kind of like a river that we float on, and the river is the power. And so our rest component, there's a lot of excellent historical theology tied into the rest component of we offer ourselves to you to do what you want to with us. And that's what we espouse as a body, is letting God do his thing, not us trying so hard to do our thing. You guys are probably familiar with Thomas Merton, and again, I call him Tommy Murtown. He loves that. But he wrote this. He says, contemplation means rest, suspension of activity, withdrawal into the mysterious interior solitude in which the soul is absorbed in the immense and fruitful silence of God and learns something of the secret of his perfections, less by seeing than by fruitive love. We want so much to be a church where God's love abides in us and affects our community and affects people that are disenfranchised, that have disassociated with the church. There's a lot of people out there that say never again where church is concerned. And we want to be this body of believers, this ecclesia that practices service, study, and worship and rest, that says, would you reconsider? Maybe you'd consider coming back to church. Maybe you'd reconsider, maybe you'd consider letting go of all this stuff that the bathwater, all the stuff that you cling to that says no to Jesus. And maybe just hold on to Jesus for a while and see. And then we've got the connecting word for here. And for, it's typically, just as an expression, an educational moment, as a public speaker, it's typically considered kind of lame-o to use like dictionary definitions. Like if you're preaching on grace, you start with Webster's definition of grace, and that's just kind of bad form. But I'm going to go there today, because if you look at dictionary.com, you look at Webster's, there's a lot of meanings for the word for. A function word to indicate purpose, indicate an intended goal, indicate the object or recipient of a perception, desire, or activity. And then it goes, There's also definitions of on behalf of, or in favor of, or accessible by. So when we say we are a church for not-so-churchy people, what it doesn't mean is for only not-so-churchy people. They'll never hear that when we say it. It doesn't mean exclusively for. It doesn't say exclusively for. It says we are a church for, which means we are on behalf of. We're trying to be accessible by. We are in favor of. So if I say, Lynn, I'm for you, right? Does that mean I'm not for me? Doesn't mean that at all. There's no exclusivity to it. It can be inclusionary. But it means that I support her. I want to see her thrive. I want to see her do well. That's what we mean when we say we're an ecclesia for not-so-churchy people, is we're for them. We exist for them. We are here to embrace and to include. You guys have seen little libraries all over the place? Who are those for? Everyone. But when a person puts one in the front yard, aren't they kind of saying this is for the community? But does that mean that they don't have access to those books anymore? See, it's not exclusive. It's for isn't necessarily exclusive. If I put yogurt on the bottom shelf of my refrigerator so my kids can get to it, and somebody says, why do you keep the yogurt down there? You eat yogurt all the time. Wouldn't it be easier to have it up here? Which nobody would ever say, but I'm just being hypothetical here. I could say that's for the kids. Does that mean it's not for me? Like now yogurt has become a non-adult food? No, it doesn't mean that. So when we say an ecclesia, a church for not-so-churchy people, we're not saying if you love church, please don't come. There's nothing of the sort built into it. In fact, my heart is the exact opposite of that, is we need you. We need you badly. Please come. Please come be the church that is for not-so-churchy people. And then when we talk about not-so-churchy people, who are we for? Who are we saying we're for? I'm for you. We exist to be accessible to you. You see, what we're talking about is trying to eliminate barriers. So my kids, if the yogurt's on the top shelf, they got to pull over a stool, and they do this all the time when they're getting food. They're reaching, and it's a dangerous situation. And there's all kinds of people on the list that we used of evangelicals and people who don't have everything together, and people who've been kicked out of the church, or legalists, or the addicted. There's all kinds of barriers between them and the church traditionally, and we're trying to break down those barriers. And so I realize now that me throwing missional on there was not adequate to convey what I'm trying to convey today. So I've replaced that with bored and just made this. There's a lot of people that are just really bored of church. They just think of church as boring. And I hope when people come here, there's going to be boring moments. It's unavoidable because people are involved and people can be kind of boring. But we hope to break down those perceptions, those preconceptions about God and about church. And so when people say, I've been hurt by the church, or church is boring, or it's irrelevant, or you're all a bunch of kooks, or church would never accept me, or church is confusing, or I'm burnt out, or hypocrites, all of them, or never again, we hope to be a church that says, maybe we can think differently about that. Maybe we can create a space where you won't be bored. Maybe you can see, and we're going to talk about a miracle that happened amongst us just here in a moment. And I hope you're going to see that this was not a kooky moment at all. And I hope our treatment of it isn't kooky. People who find church confusing, I hope we break it down in ways that they can understand it. So do you see that the ecclesia, the foundational, the people who serve and study and worship and rest together, we have to have them. We don't want them to be bored either. We don't want them to become confused or burnt out or embrace hypocrisy. And so all this stuff, these people who are asking, the deconstructionists who are saying these things and asking these kind of questions are asking the right stuff. We just have to create a space where these things can adequately be addressed, and we have to do it as an ecclesia. And so in some sense, we're saying a church for not so ecclesiacal people. We're asking you, if you don't have a place, would you consider coming to our place? It's a third way space where we can intersect with people. And we're trying to do that as a community center. We're trying to do that as a church. We're trying to do that when we feed downtown. We're trying to create spaces where people can interact and feel comfortable inviting their friends and so forth. So when I say we're a church for not-so-churchy people, here's what I mean. And I know you can't read it, and that's on purpose. We're a gathering of people from various backgrounds that want to follow Jesus, so we worship, serve, study, and rest together, and we desire to make space for, embrace, and include people who don't feel like they fit into that group, offering a safe place for them to engage in these same practices to whatever degree they'd like to and explore their faith and overall worldview with whatever intensity they desire. We're believers and think Jesus is beyond great, and Christian practice is really, really important. So we hope that they too will come to love Jesus and follow him, not necessarily exactly like we do, but even if they never do, they're more than welcome to fully connect with our community and journey with us as we try to sort out our own lives and faith, which doesn't make for a very good bumper sticker. Thus, a church for not-so-churchy people. It's a marketing slogan that is meant to convey a message that says there's a gathering of people who are for you. If you're disenchanted, if you're disenfranchised, if you're deconstructing, if you're an addict, if you're hurt, if you've been abused, we are a gathering of people that are for you. So Daylight is a church for people who love church. I love church. I love the church. I was texting a pastor, a friend of mine right before this, saying, have a great service, man. I love you. But anytime there's relational conflict, and there is relational conflict between the community at large and the church, it requires kind of a courage to confront. And it takes some maturity to address. And I think the church needs to figure out what the bathwater is. What is the stuff we can flush? And we need to face off with that stuff in those uncomfortable conversations. But then the not-so-churchy people, the non-church, it's hard to step in these doors for the first time if you've been burnt by church 1,000 times. It's hard to tune into a broadcast. And so both communities have to face a little bit of discomfort to make this thing work. But we are a community of followers of Jesus that embrace people who are not necessarily followers of Jesus and want to break down and make accessible the lives that we believe in. We had an amazing event. Kat and Ernie, would you come up here with us? And where is the handheld mic? Is it? Do we know? Can I get it from you? So we had something really amazing happen in our ecclesia just recently, and most of you have seen the video at this point, but I want to share it with you, and I want these guys to share their story. Kat fought a battle with breast cancer about 3 years ago, right? And come on up here. And Ernie, you're just here to be beautiful. Good job. So Kat, you fought a battle with breast cancer, and it looked good, and then you got some bad news. Tell us briefly that story.
Okay, so about 3 years ago, I had breast cancer and had to have a bilateral mastectomy. I went through chemo, finished that in November of the same year. It was 2018. Had to do radiation, finished that in February. By September, I had my first CAT scan. And I went to the doctor. They said everything looked great. I was like, awesome. So then I had my next CAT scan in March. So that would have been 2020? Yes. So by the time we made it around, it was 2020. And they didn't call me with the results or anything like that. So I went in for just kind of a checkup. And I asked for those results. And she came back and she's like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry, but it's returned, but it's in your liver. So I had 3 spots in my liver. So I asked to see the CAT scan in September, and they missed the spot. So it actually started again in September of 2019. So I went 6 months with not knowing. As soon as that happened, it just sort of like kind of took over my liver a little bit, just a couple of spots here and there. I started medicine, and it was looking good. But then I had one spot that kept growing. So we decided to do a liver resection because it went down to one spot. Score. So we're thinking, and Ernie and I both were like, we feel great about this. We feel totally awesome that we think that this is the answer. And I got the liver resection done in January. I went back 3 weeks later for my follow-up, and he said there are 4 spots on your liver. And I asked him because he did an ablation on those 4 spots. And I asked him on 4 spots, not those, but on 4 spots. And he's like, I don't know, but you need to go on a systemic medicine, just a protocol kind of thing, and let's see if we can get ahead of this. And I'm like, but is it those spots you ablated? Because in my head, I'm thinking it could have been like scar tissue from those, getting burned. And then they said like 6 weeks, okay, just stay on the medicine that you're on. 6 weeks later, you're going to have another PET scan, so let's just wait it out. In those 6 weeks, my liver completely filled up with tumors. And even though we had that one cut off, the whole thing just completely exploded with tumors. I literally could feel it all the way over to my left side, down below my belly button. That whole area got hard in 6 weeks. And at that moment, I felt a despair that I had never felt before. I had never known. And it didn't look good because all my liver enzymes were through the roof. My liver was shutting down. And I can never make it through this without crying. I'm sorry. And it was the most scared I've ever been. So I had to start chemo again. I went on chemo. My scan, March 24th. And if you guys haven't seen the pictures, I mean, it completely lit up. But then Wednesday I went.
Let's talk briefly. First off, I think it's amazing that you get CAT scans. I just want to say that out
Thanks.
loud. I think that's so fantastic.
That's awesome.
Tell us, so your doctor in March didn't schedule a follow-up.
No.
And wept when he told you
He did.
what was going on.
He was very upset because, we all thought that the liver resection was the answer to getting rid of the cancer out of my liver. And he cried. And he didn't schedule a follow-up. And every other time that I've gone, he's always scheduled a 3-month follow-up. He didn't this time. And he asked me to get an oncologist in Louisville, because I've been going to Cleveland, get an oncologist in Louisville, because when I need to go to the hospital, when I have an emergency, he can't do anything from there. So, they would have to take care of it here. When he didn't schedule that follow-up, he honestly didn't think that I was going to come back, because my liver was that bad, because my enzymes were that bad, because the whole thing was that bad.
We have a video. So when the video starts, the picture on the right is Kat's liver in March.
March 24th.
And the picture on the left is this week.
July 21st.
Here we go.
So this is the new and this is the old one. So let's just scroll it down. Again, this is the new, this is the liver, this is the spleen. This white stuff, golden stuff, or the flame, that's the cancer. We are not seeing any of that here.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, any of that. Just look at this horrible thing. So it's clear, these horrible things. So these are the kidneys, as we talked before. The contrast, whatever that bright thing injected is coming through, and it still go to your bladder. So this is still the liver, and that looks really good, really good.
That is amazing.
Yeah, and then when we go down in the bladder, you should see some contrast. This is the bladder. The contrast is going to the bladder, so that's not cancer. So everything looks really good, really good.
Okay. I can't stop watching the video. I'm just saying.
I've watched it dozens of times.
Yeah, it's amazing. The one on the right, it was completely full, and as I told you, it's stretched over there. And when I went back on Wednesday, I can still feel kind of like a hardness here, and I'm kind of questioning that. And they're like, that's the scar tissue from where the cancer died. And so I have no hardness, no whatever, just, that little scar tissue. Okay, I can live with that. I'm good with that, but yeah. Thank you, Jesus. And I can't quit crying, I can't quit smiling, I can't quit praising Jesus, and I don't know what to do with it all.
So, yeah. So I'm going to be straight with you, and I was straight with you last week about where I'm at on some of this stuff, is I don't get the gifts of the Holy Spirit, healing, miracles, what's the process, how do you parse it all out? I can't make heads or tails out of it. There's times that I've heard of and I've seen with my own eyes where somebody was miraculously healed because somebody said in the name of Jesus, like it was a gift of healing that occurred. But in this case, you guys were so supportive of this family. That's fair to say, right?
Yes.
I mean, just amazingly supportive and praying. And Cindy Burfield, I know you led the charge to pray and pray consistently. And she was also under chemo, and we don't want to discount, the medical field, and we don't want to pretend that's not a part of this equation, because we believe in taking your aspirin and praying for the headache around here. But the doctor and his fellow kept saying, we don't see results like
We don't
this.
see results
They
like
didn't schedule a follow-up with you for a reason.
Right.
And so all we know is that our friend is cancer-free, it seems, right now in front of us.
Amen.
And that's good. That's good, and God is good. And you guys are a family that supported them and continue to support them.
Okay, so what I didn't express to you, H, earlier was you talked about the chemo.
Mhm.
They did not expect the chemo to completely get rid of it. They were just expecting for, to kind of recede, because I couldn't eat, I couldn't breathe because it was pressing that much. And when I got the chemo, after like the second round, I started with hand and foot syndrome, and it's where you can't hardly walk because your feet are so sore, your hands are so sore. They decreased my dose. Do you get that? They decreased my dose. So I wasn't getting the full amount that they prescribed because my hands and feet hurt so bad. So they decreased that. And then the second thing is, I have to say that you all, whoever's prayed, I couldn't do this on my own. That's why I asked when the cancer came back the second time for you guys to pray, because I couldn't do that on my own. And I truly feel that because you all got together, you were my friends that lifted me through the roof when the paralytic could not get down there, could not get to see Jesus, and his friends took him to Jesus. That's what you guys did for me. You took me to Jesus. And so when the church gets together and pray, good things happen, miracles happen. So for you, I'm grateful. I'm beyond grateful. Thank you so much.